Good evening. James McCanney here with my Science Hour, April 7th, 2016. Quick announcement. First of all, the main science topic, I'm going to talk about taking a trip into the inner part of our galaxy, some of the very dense star systems, and what it would be like, both visually, physically, electrically, magnetically, all kinds of factors. So that's the main science topic. First, a quick announcement about water filters. As you know, or most of you know, a number of weeks ago, maybe more, I introduced the new Imperial double diameter water filter element. It's the same GF technology as my other water filter elements. They're just bigger. Now, there's a slight disadvantage in that you don't get to put as much water into your tank. The stainless or the plastic filter, they filter twice as fast. For some people, that's not a big factor. But they last quite a bit longer just because there's a lot more volume in it. And so it's just really a trade-off. It depends on what people's attitude is. I myself use both. I use the Imperials and I use the standard size. I personally like the standard size, but lots of people are buying the Imperials. It's a dollar for dollar. It's a better deal. You get more lifetime of filtration out of the Imperials for the amount of money you spend. And so it's a little bit better, but they're more expensive. So I've gotten more and more requests to have the initial unit purchased with the Imperials in it. So without trying to make the web page too complicated, I've arranged so that you can order an upgrade. And so instead of getting the regular filters in your stainless steel or plastic water filter, you can get the Imperials and then buy the Imperials as filter element packages. You can get 4 or 10 in a package. And so anyway, it's just another option. Just wanted to let you know that's available on the web page. Remember that if you have purchased any water filter system in the past 15 years or more, and you have that stainless steel container sitting around, maybe you're close to using up whatever filter elements you were using, you can upgrade to my GF filter elements, and they fit all of those that were made over the past 15 years. And the reason is simply because back in the early days there was one standard container and everything else kind of grew out of that. So no matter what plastic or stainless steel container that you have, you can put my filter elements in there, and then you're dealing with 2016 technology. Really the latest, greatest, where these take out all, literally everything that's in your water, all the bad stuff, the toxins, etc. And they're certified to do that. You look at other, I don't even have competition. There is no competition because literally nobody else has taken the time or paid the money or jumped through all the hoops that are necessary to have their stuff tested in an independent laboratory. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it's an ongoing process. So my GF filters, you're just not going to find anything like it. Very high quality, and when you take that out of the box and you put it in your water filter and you start using it, you know that it's doing what I say it's going to do because they're tested in an independent laboratory. They hold an NSF national certification. So anyway, enough of that. Another special announcement, I'm having a big sale on the water filters up until Sunday, April 10th, midnight. Prices are going to be reduced quite a bit, and so just go to the webpage JamesCCSCI.com and take advantage of those. It's somewhat in honor of this new packaging that I have relative to the Imperial double-sized filters. So take advantage of that. I want people to go there and look at these new packages, etc. So literally all of the items in the gravity feed water filter line are going to be reduced till Sunday night. Go there and check it out. JamesCCSCI.com is the webpage. That's JMCC, S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, I as in Indigo.com. There's been some crazy talk coming out of the news again about Planet 9. Now remember, Pluto used to be Planet 9, but they demoted Pluto because if they didn't, they'd have to explain why there are hundreds, literally hundreds more planets in the solar system. And they didn't want to do that. So, and this is all coming out of the same fairy tale nursery rhyme center in Caltech, and some of it out of Stanford, but mainly out of Caltech, a guy named Michael Brown. And they have what they call is evidence, which is just some orbits of planets they've discovered out there that seem to have similar orbits. And they say, well, this has to be due to some major planet gathering these together and hurting them, so to speak. But they haven't found this alleged Planet 9. And notice they're really, really big on calling it Planet 9, not Planet X or 10. That's really what Planet X means, is planet. There's two different meanings. Planet X, the Roman numeral 10, because Pluto used to be the 9th planet, so that if they discovered another one, it would be Planet 10 or X. But Planet X is literally an old astronomical term that goes back literally to the 1600s, and it simply meant any planet that did not have a designation. So X meaning kind of like they do for Christmas. They put an X there instead of Christ's name, which is a abomination of the holiday. But X represents something that should be there. So in that sense, X, when you talk about Planet X, and remember that there are many Planet X objects, not just one, but be that as it may, now they're talking about this Planet 9. And they haven't discovered it, but this is the twist that came out this past week. The Pleiades is a little teeny constellation of 7 stars, the Pleiades sisters they're called. It's a little teeny constellation. You can actually see it with the naked eye, and with binoculars or even a small amateur telescope, you can see the Pleiades up there, the 7 sisters, and one of them has gone dark. So now there's really 6 sisters in the Pleiades, and Michael Brown goes, oh, well, we think that our sun came close to the Pleiades and it robbed the Pleiades of this other planet, and that's where it came from. And I'm like, my goodness, what on earth are these people smoking out in California? Well, it is California, and so maybe they are. The strange thing is that this gets published. Who in their right mind would then take this and publish it and give it any credibility at all? I mean, it is absolutely fairy tale science, goofy, but you're going to get hit with all kinds of stuff like this. We are now in April. We're coming up to the month of May, and May is typically where disinformation peaks regarding asteroids or Planet X or all kinds of things like that. Actually, I haven't seen much this year, so maybe we're in for a big blast here in the near future. But anyway, that's coming out about alleged Planet 9. And remember, they haven't discovered anything. Nobody should be even talking about this. This is pure wild speculation, nothing more, nothing less. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump right into the discussion tonight. What if, let me quick mention, we're coming up here on Earth Day, and I'm doing something personally. Maybe you would like to join me in my personal effort here of just relaxing and taking it easy and trying to enjoy life. Don't worry about government, just ignore it, and sooner or later it'll simply go away because nobody's paying attention to it. But the news media drives this home, and everybody's jumping up and down and talking about it and everything else. And the reality is that none of it is ever going to cure a problem. Whatever they do to try and cure a problem is going to create more problems or different kind of problems, whatever. And so you're wasting a lot of time and energy when you should be just spending that with your family, go on a picnic instead of watching the evening news. Go out to a lake, go out to a park, go camp for the weekend. And, I'll just take you back in my history a little bit. Back in the early 1970s, I was living out of the country. And people would say, oh, did you hear about such and such? And I'm like, I haven't heard about anything. And it was just, so remote to my existence that, and hey, they're still talking about, back in that era, they were talking about the peace in the Middle East. And, hey, nothing has changed. And it's not going to change. It's going to be the same turmoil all the way down the road. So the worst thing you can do to the people who control stuff is just ignore them. And the more people that ignore them, the sooner we'll get to the state where they simply have no significance at all. But I'll tell you this, it's hard to ignore them when they're out kicking your door in, stealing your property, like they're doing in the western states. It's hard to ignore them and live a nice, happy, remote lifestyle. So anyway, I'm not sure, just as much as possible, people have to, enjoy life is what I'm saying. And it's no different than back in the Roman days, or how many empires have come and gone and fallen, and then the next one rolls around. And, who are the people that are the happiest? Probably the people with no money, because there's nothing to steal from them. It's kind of a strange dichotomy. Okay, off to the inner part of the galaxy. Now, just to give you a piece of perspective here, we live, planet Earth, our sun, our solar system, we live in the very far reaches of the galaxy. We're way out in the boondocks in the galaxy. And so our nearest star system is 4.3 light years away. That means if you went at the speed of light, it would take you 4.3 light years to get there. Now, a number of weeks ago, I talked about going to the stars and what kind of time frame you could do this with. And just as a side note, after I gave those lectures and I talked about going to Mars, we could go to Mars in a day, we could go to Pluto in about 11 days, this whole concept of NASA taking off with chemical rockets and this big puff of smoke, and they burn all the fuel up in like 20 seconds or 3 minutes or whatever. That's not the way to go and travel into space. Because there's many reasons. But what I described was a method of going quickly to other places in outer space, and it's called the 1G factor, or the technique, whatever. Anyway, you accelerate for 1G till you get halfway there. If you're going to another star, you simply do that until you get up to 3/4 of the speed of light, and then you cruise, you just coast. And you could get to the next star system in about 5.5 years. That's less time than it took NASA to get to Pluto with the New Horizons spacecraft. So you could go to the nearest big star, which is Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. It's about 8 light years away, 8.6 light years, something like that. You could go there in about 11 years with the technique that I'm talking about. So anyway, I described that on the show. But the point is that when you travel like that, in fact, there are propulsion systems, but my point was that as soon as I got done with that lecture series, NASA came out and said exactly the same thing. Exactly. I mean, they were almost word for word in their announcement that they put out about that. And Russia, a number of weeks ago, Putin said, hey, we're developing nuclear rockets to go between the planets. The next week, the head of NASA comes out and he goes, yeah, we're going to develop rockets out of nuclear rockets. And I'm like, wait a minute, NASA doesn't have any idea what they're doing. They've never made a nuclear rocket. They don't have any plans. They don't have any idea how to do it. I mean, they got a general idea, but there's no plans on the drawing board. And anyway, that's what they're thinking of throwing that in before they go to Mars. Well, you know, what a bunch of, you know, they're just a bunch of goofballs. But my point is that going to a star system in our neck of the galaxy is not that difficult. It's a number of years away. Now, let's go into, I was just trying to give you a bit of perspective on where we are in the galaxy, the distances involved. And by the way, here's another good way to think of the distance to the nearest star. I used to use this example when I would draw out the solar system on a blackboard. That's when, back in the days when you had blackboard and a piece of chalk in your hand. And the chalkboard that I had in front of this lecture hall, I had 90 students in the lecture hall for my astronomy class, university level, and I would draw the sun the size of a golf ball on the left side of this board. And then I would draw where the Mercury and Venus and Earth and Mars and Jupiter were. And then you would go all the way out, and the way I had it scaled was that by the time you got out to Pluto, Pluto was at the very far right side of the blackboard, 90 feet away, with the sun being the size of a golf ball. Earth was the size of a speck of chalk dust, and Jupiter was 1/10 the diameter of the sun. That just gives you a feel. And I think Jupiter was about 5 feet away on this scale, so there's a lot of space between Pluto and Jupiter. Anyway, on that scale, let's take the sun and imagine that you are in, let's say, Chicago, and you have a basketball in your hand. This is to give you a scale of the openness and emptiness of outer space. You're in Chicago, you have a basketball in your hand. The next star, 4.3 light years away on this relative scale, would be in St. Louis, a guy with a basketball there. So that's the amount of empty space that's out in our neck of the woods in the galaxy. That's the nearest star. And you know, that's the kind of distance with the star proportionately being the size of a basketball. Okay, and then if you took and wanted to know where Sirius, the biggest, brightest star in the sky, is, you'd have to go all the way to Dallas, Texas. That would be where Sirius would be the size, well, it would be bigger than a basketball. In that case, it'd be about the size of one of those big medicine balls that you sit on and do exercises. It's at one of those big inflatable exercise balls, and that would be in Dallas. Okay, so anyway, that gives you a scale feeling for our part of the galaxy. Let's go in deep into the galaxy, into a star cluster. Now let's imagine that there are 1,000 stars in our star cluster. They're all there. You know, you can see, you would not have, first thing you would notice is you would not have nighttime. And so you would, every place you would be, the stars would actually look like planets up there, little dots, not pinpoint dots, but they would look bigger than the planets that we see in the night sky. So there'd be a lot of Jupiter-sized objects up in the sky, very bright, and literally you wouldn't have any real nighttime. So as your race developed on the planet that's surrounding one of these stars in that region of the galaxy, you would not have a concept of the expanse of the universe like we do. That's the very first thing that you would have to understand. Now, you would think, well, these people would be very advanced. They would have possibly a lot more resources, and there'd be a lot more communication. So if a race developed into a star-faring, space-faring society, it would be very easy for them to get to the other stars. The stars would not be light years away. They would be very close. They would be extremely close relative to what we deal with way out in the boondocks here. So going to the next star, star travel, etc., they would be able to, if they learned the electromagnetic propulsion systems, there would be a lot of electrical current. And with that, let's go back to a place called Atlantis. If you read my book, Atlantis to Tesla, the Colburn Connection, I make the point that the Atlanteans, who had their main base in what is now the South China Sea, there was a lot of naturally occurring atmospheric electricity in that area. So they learned how to use it. They learned how to use atmospheric electricity. They probably, or they're very likely, with very simple means, by having glass tubes, metal, and batteries, even including seawater batteries, they could have developed the ability to discharge the vertical electric field and then learn how to ride up that the electric current via the magnetic field that it creates and go into orbit very simply. We have lots of references in ancient texts referring to that type of flight, although they don't talk about electromagnetism. They simply talk about the fact that those ancient cultures had the ability, and what I make the point in Atlantis to Tesla, the Colburn Connection, is that that is what they were doing. So if the race in this star cluster, if any one of the planets there that had intelligent life on it developed this system, just like, say, sailing vessels, the use of archery equipment, the use of different types of metals would transfer within cultures around Earth during cultural development, it was very quick, or the construction of pottery or other things that would move very quickly between cultures, the use of rocks, precious stones, metallurgy, on and on and on. The development of, once it was developed, it would transfer very quickly. So you would have a lot of travel in that star system, in this star system with potentially 1,000 stars in very close proximity. But it could be very likely that they would never gain an understanding of the universe like we have, because they wouldn't see out of their star system. It's not like they'd go out at night and see a beautiful dark sky with stars, and then with, say, telescopes be able to get up and see great distances, because there would be a lot of haze and a lot of dust and etc. in that region because of all of the star activity. And they potentially would not see even the rest of the galaxy. They might not even understand that they're in a large galaxy. Whereas we out here in the boondocks, you can go out at night and see the Milky Way galaxy stretching across the sky, billions of stars. You can see it very clearly. But the people in there would not see it clearly. That's a very interesting development. And so they might live their whole existence. I got a kick out of that when I used to live in New Orleans. And there's many cities where I've lived like this, where the people don't leave. The people in New Orleans, most of them are born there, live their entire life there, die there, work there, went to school there. If they went to college, they went to college there, and they lived there their whole life and never crossed Lake Pontchartrain, never crossed the causeway out west, or never went east over to Mobile, Alabama or whatever. They literally lived their entire life in New Orleans and never left. And that would be the same case with the people living in one of these dense star clusters farther in the galaxy. They would probably develop modern transportation. It would spread. Cultures that were, say, on a planetary system that was just developing probably would be visited by so-called aliens from another star system. They would be visited. Now, you think, well, gee, how would that work? Well, our history, our written history, goes back a number of thousands of years on planet Earth. The humanoids, so-called intelligent species, I really don't think we're that intelligent as a species. But be that as it may, our history goes back a few thousand years, and at that point people were throwing spears and throwing rocks at each other. I mean, that was the level of technology, and most of the technology was used for warfare. And so the development of modern man to get up to the point where we could, fly in airplanes and go into outer space, things like that, was only, we were still riding horses 100 years ago. I mean, you and I weren't, but the human race was. And then came along the car, and things advanced pretty quickly. The computer age, the industrial age, automobiles, air flight, air travel, space travel, etc. It happened pretty quickly. And so what would happen if we lived in this star cluster in towards the center of the galaxy, and were visited very early in our development back in the Roman days, and all of a sudden all this technology was dumped on those people, how to manufacture, glass production, metallurgy, all of the other things, electrical circuits, electricity and magnetism, understanding that. Remember, that was developed slowly. I mean, when the discoveries came, the Maxwells and those people who made the monumental discoveries in physics, relatively it was slow. I mean, there was a progression, and if you study physics, in the history of physics like I have, then you understand that this progression took time, and then once one thing was established, then came the next thing. Then after that we had, the photoelectric effect and the understanding of quantum physics, and on, which led up to the transistor, or, also the photoelectric effect being used for tubes, the old radio tubes, the vacuum tubes, etc. And so this was a development that took, a long time, because each stage was built on the old technology. As soon as transistor junctions were understood, then immediately they understood how to apply these to circuitry, because it was the same concept as the old electronic vacuum tubes. The same type of techniques could be built into solid state, and therefore they just built circuits with transistors instead of tubes. All of the tube circuitry technology had already been developed. The diodes, the triodes, the multi-plated systems, the amplifier tubes, etc., were all developed. So all you had to do was cascade transistors and build the exact same circuits. So transistor technology was a macro step, one of those quantum steps into the future, but as soon as it was understood what it was, they immediately could apply it and use all of the knowledge that they had previously for electrical circuits and radios and transmitters and receivers, etc., that they used with vacuum tubes. So, but what I'm saying, imagine that if back in the Egyptian days or in the Roman days, all of a sudden a group of aliens come in and just drop all of this technology in the middle of, it would have changed the course of history. This is the kind of thing that would be possible in these star clusters where, communication, transportation, would be much more readily available than out here where we are. So the whole alien question, that's something I'm not going to talk about this show relative to planet Earth, but in a situation where you have dense star clusters, very 100% certain fast developing races would develop much faster because of communication with races that already existed. And there's potential for races there that would be, say, millions of years old. Because let's look at what's happened on Earth with natural disasters from outer space. The Nibiru type of scenario where Earthlings were set back to basically to the cave age because of natural disasters from outer space. The Planet X Nibiru type of situation, and the potential for that to happen in the future. Well, those same potentials for natural disasters are very much present no matter where you are. That's the way the solar system works. That's the way the star systems work. That's the way they adopt new members by capture, and these are very damaging events when they happen. They can do a lot of damage to the existing planetary structure, etc. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if, say Earth has a disaster, well, there's really nobody here to come and save us and, try and help us rebuild. The people had to just kind of crawl out of the ashes and rebuild. And now modern science is trying to deny that ever happened. And I'm trying to tell people in a sane sense, yeah, those happened in the past, they're going to happen in the future. But part of the big disinformation ploy regarding Planet X is to make all kinds of false predictions, and then when they don't happen, people go, oh, that's a bunch of hooey, I don't believe any of that, and then they walk away. And so that's the point, that's the entire point of all the disinformation that's floating around out there. But the reality is, if something like that happens again on planet Earth, and we go back to the cave ages, we're on our own, basically. Nobody's going to come and try and save us. So in a situation in the inner galaxy, news would probably travel pretty quickly that, hey, that planet over in that star system there just got hit by a big comet passage, a new solar system member or new star system planetary member coming in, and those people really took it on the chin. It would be a matter of possibly, less than a year, you could have major support there to get these people back up and running again, or move them off to another place that would be suitable. So you'd have terraforming, all kinds of other processes that these people would learn, and then, like I say, that's how you would have a technology-based society that could be potentially millions of years old. Because the reason the human race isn't technologically advanced over a period of millions of years, although we've probably been around that long as an intelligent species, is because when we get wiped out, there's nobody to come over and help out. We just got to crawl out of this ourselves, or the next species comes along and evolves through the proper steps to become, start to control the environment. And by the way, my definition of an intelligent species is one that controls his environment, or the species environment. In other words, you can take the environment and change it. So, in a sense, birds do this. They take twigs and they can build a nest, but that's the extent of it. They're not going to build a car. They're not going to build an airplane. They're not going to build a space capsule. They're not going to build a rocket or an electromagnetic propulsion system. The nest is as far as it goes, out of twigs, and that's where they live. And when next spring comes around, they fly off and they build a new nest and have, drop eggs and have baby birds or whatever. That's as far as the animals go. So the real intelligent species is one that can change their environment. And I also have a secondary, actually it might be the primary reason that you could call a species or a being intelligent, is that they can look out into the universe, look and understand the creation, understand their position in that creation, and then look and say, ooh, who created all of this? The bird isn't necessarily going to think that. The bird is just living day to day, gathering seeds and eating bugs or whatever they do. But they're not, and they may, in a sense, by their being, their happiness or whatever you might call it, their natural happiness, in a sense, honoring a creator. But it's the intelligent being that can look around, look at all the stars, look at the universe, look at the galaxy, look at the solar system, and then go, wow, there was a master plan here. This is very well organized. There's some chaos in it. There's some damaging things that happen, but that's part of the grand design. That's the way it is. Like it or not, this is a very well organized system. I talk about that in the diamond principle, that if you go to another star system on the far side of the universe, that the diamonds that you find there are going to have the same physical characteristics as diamonds that you find on Earth. They're created in the same way. Every diamond is different. They have fractures and they have internal flaws, etc., that make each diamond unique. But they are created, they are made in the same process. So, at any rate, going back to the center of the galaxy, let's look at some electromagnetic interactions that you would find there. There's something I explain actually in DVD number 3, and this is part of my work on galaxies, which goes back to my days at Cornell. I published an article called Continuing Galactic Formation. You can see that paper. It's reprinted in the appendix of my book, Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes. I think it's appendix number 1. It's a galaxy paper, but and then the Saturn paper, which followed Saturn's sweeper moons predicted, is where I talk about the electric fields around planets. And anyway, the point is, in my DVD number 3, I talk about the electrical currents that flow down the arms of the galaxies. So they are formed by a gravitational collapse. The gas clouds collapse in. As they collapse, they form a flow outwards, and this forms the two arms that spin out, and then the planetary systems are in orbits around the center of the galaxy. Now, something else is going on. The center of the galaxy is a fusion-based object. In other words, it has fusion reactions going on, just like the sun. So it has a proton wind, and it develops a capacitor. So the discharge of that solar capacitor comes down the galactic arms. So if you're down near the center of the galaxy, or say halfway out in the arm like the star cluster we're talking about, you have significant electrical currents passing through that region. And no, that is not the source of energy for the stars, not by any stretch of the imagination. The stars, the fusion is literally a fusion fire. It's an electrical fire that burns in the upper atmosphere of the stars. But the point is, the electromagnetic propulsion systems that I developed, and this is a movie that you can see. I gave a talk at the UFO Congress that was held in Laughlin, Nevada, about 1,200 people in attendance, including people from the Navy, physicists from NASA, from other groups were there in full force, and also listening to what I had to say. But what I was describing were the electromagnetic propulsion systems. And the name of my talk was the electric highways to the stars. And in that, I described the electromagnetic propulsion systems that literally ride the electrical currents between star systems. And so that was the point of my talk. And so in this star cluster that's closer in towards the center of the galaxy, the electrical currents between the stars would be much greater. So the transportation technique to move between stars is the propensity for a civilization to understand this and utilize this and travel between stars very quickly is extremely high. And once they start doing it, any developing races that are there are going to quickly adapt, and you're going to have civilizations. What I'm saying is the possibility of a civilization developing that's millions of years old is much higher in a star cluster than it is out in the boondocks where we live on planet Earth. For us to develop an extremely technically advanced civilization is very difficult, not to mention the the strange situation we're in now with government funding and a bunch of buffoons who call themselves PhD scientists working for NASA and other organizations that have PhDs in completely ludicrous, nonsensical fairy tale science, which is for 30 to 50 years has blocked advancement of real science. And so there again, if you're in this star cluster and people have already learned the techniques of moving around, telecommunications, all of the other things that you need to be an advanced culture, then the transportation between star systems using the electromagnetic propulsion systems would be much, once it's established, it would be like us, let's take sailboats for example. The racing sailboats that you see now with the Marconi sail rigs, those are the tall triangular shape with the narrow part at the top of the sail. Imagining going back to a square lug sail that they used back in the Roman era, or for example, they didn't know how to sail into the wind. They used lug sails and went with the currents and the winds, and then of course when the discovery of the so-called New World occurred, Columbus, etc., thereafter, they still were using square-rigged sails that only went with the wind. They really couldn't sail against the wind very well. And so what would they do? They would sail south along the African coast when they were coming from Europe. They would sail south along the African coast, pick up the trade winds which blew westerly, and then they would get to their destination, and they could turn left and right as they were going, but basically they followed the wind pattern and then knew by watching the stars and using transits and other surveying equipment basically on board, the sextant, etc., they would be able to land where they wanted to go. And then when they left, they would sail north and pick up the trade winds that blew them back to Europe. So, but now, if you have a Marconi rigged sailboat, you don't have to follow the trade winds. You can sail across the ocean any place you want in any direction you want. And this is the same way with the electromagnetic propulsion systems. You can ride the electric rivers to the stars any direction you want. You got to stay within the currents, of course, and it's a little bit more limited. But the point is that if you accelerate, and you can use also the electric currents in comets when you come into a solar system for braking, or when you're leaving a solar system for acceleration. This is one thing that is explained by my plasma discharge comet model. So let's look at this aspect of transportation. And I might go back to a little incident that happened when Comet Hale-Bopp came into the solar system. It was reported, and I have this from my own inside sources, that NASA literally detected alien communication coming from the vicinity of Hale-Bopp. But here's what happens, and there's a good reason for understanding why this happened. The electromagnetic propulsion systems, and by the way, was 1982 when I introduced that into basically the military, the aerospace industry in Los Angeles, 1982. But the electrical current that occurs in the comet is very intense. So it produces, around that centralized electrical current, it produces a fairly significant magnetic field. So literally the strongest magnetic field in outer space is in the region of the electrical discharge around big comets. These are big comets, not little Halley's comets or little, P67 or Halley's comets or little comets. We're talking about big comets like Hale-Bopp and bigger. Hale-Bopp was kind of in terms of big comets, Hale-Bopp was not a big comet. But it still held enough electrical current in that central current sheet because of the discharge of the solar capacitor that it could have been used for braking, for aero braking or electrical braking, and that's the entire purpose of my talk, the one I gave at the UFO Congress 2000, I think it was 2003, where I gave that particular talk, and called Electric Highways to the Stars. So if you're riding between star systems, another thing happens is that once the spacecraft becomes involved in the discharge, it starts riding the electrical currents and using the magnetic field around those currents for acceleration. They also, just like a comet nucleus, the discharge starts to concentrate on that object. And so the more you use it, the more concentrated the electric current becomes on that object. And so it's a process that builds. Let me take an example. What if you had a sailboat and you put it out in the middle of the ocean, and the wind concentrated on an object that was out in the middle of the ocean, which would be your sailboat? Then all of this wind energy would go into pushing your sailboat much faster than it would normally go. But wind doesn't work that way. Electrical currents do work that way. That's the entire point of the plasma discharge comet model, is once that discharge gets going, it builds and it builds and it builds. And and part of it is based on the size of the object. The bigger the object, the larger the surface charge can be, and therefore it draws in more tail material, and the overall discharge becomes bigger. Big comets are based, the discharge is based on a large nucleus. Small nuclei do not have that big an electrical discharge of the solar capacitor. That's why I said Hale-Bopp, which of course NASA lied about the size of the nucleus of Hale-Bopp. The size of the nucleus of Hale-Bopp was fairly large, relatively large. And but anyway, the point is that because it was large, it had a fairly significant electrical discharge. It had a very significant sunward spike. And so that also tells us, if you can see that visibly around a comet, that's telling us that electrical discharge, primarily electrons coming out from the sunward side, is lighting up that comet like a light bulb, but it's due to the electron current coming from the sun in the form of basically a beam. And that's being concentrated on the comet nucleus. But the same thing happens with a spacecraft. If a spacecraft is involved in the discharge of a capacitor or an electrical current, it concentrates on that spacecraft. So the effect of the electromagnetic propulsion system is greatly increased. And now let me just take an aside note. People who work in Tier 1 science, military science, aerospace industries, listen to my show every week. And this is one that's probably going to be passed around quite heavily within those circles. Because, in those circles, they're trying to use alternative methods of getting into space and maneuvering. that's not going to be anything you're going to see in the general public, because NASA will never pick up on that in a million years. They're only going to do the things that basically don't work, that will not get large-scale populations into outer space. But there again, going back to the star cluster in the vicinity of the, say, halfway out the galactic arm, those people are going to learn these techniques of transportation, propulsion systems, and utilize them, and that knowledge is going to spread amongst all the other civilizations. And due to the fact that if one of the civilizations, one of the planets gets, say, completely obliterated, or the civilization gets sent back to the cave ages, the rest of the star system is going to continue to succeed. So that's where you would go to find advanced civilizations that are millions of years old, potentially more. So at any rate, I wanted to give you kind of a feeling for what it would be like going into another region of the galaxy, different than our location out here in the boondocks, what it would be like, what are some of the parameters, and therefore, for example, the Drake equation does not apply in a situation like that, because what is the Drake equation? The Drake equation is a series of factors that tries to determine the probability of a planet system supporting life and intelligent life, etc. And then ultimately, what's the number of advanced civilizations, doing a statistical analysis basically by multiplying together factors, probabilistic factors. You get a actual, and then you multiply that by the number of star systems in, say, a galaxy. You would get an estimate of the number of intelligent species that could be exist at any given time. And but remember that I added the McCanney factor into the Drake equation, because the ultimate reason for the Drake equation was to use in the SETI program, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And so anyway, they wanted to know what's the possibility that an intelligent race is signaling us, saying, hey, we're here, let's talk, let's have a conversation. And the last factor that I talked about in, I don't know which show it was, somewhere in the not too distant past, I said the McCanney factor is 0. You multiply all the other factors in the Drake equation by 0, and you come up with 0 probability that an intelligent race would signal out and say we're here. Only a race as stupid as the human race, led by Carl Sagan and other SETI doctors and PhDs, only the human race would be so stupid as to signal out and say, hey, we're here. Because there's the grand possibility that, hey, those alien races out there are not your friends, and they might come over and maybe like to eat people, or steal the natural resources, or maybe they didn't even know that this planet was here. A nice blue water planet with really nice, great oxygen atmosphere and abundant plant life. Guess what happened to the Aztecs and the Incas and the Maya? Do you think if they had communication and they started signaling over to Europe, hey everybody, look, we're here, hundreds of years before Columbus? Remember that Columbus was not only an explorer, he was an opportunist. He was here to get booty, money, slaves. He took slaves back with him on his first trip to sell. He said, look we can make a fortune here. We got people, we can sell them for slaves. Look at he brought all kinds of other plants and other things back with him, because that was the wealth that they could develop. And that big rush of so-called exploration, it had nothing to do with exploration. It was all about the grabbing of wealth, not to mention the gold that they robbed from the Incas and the Aztecs. The Mayas did not have that much gold, although they did have quite a bit of gold, but it was mainly the Incas and the Aztecs and some other Central South American regions that had a lot of gold, but it was all about plundering the resources, selling slaves. That's what it was all about. So no, calling out and saying, hey, alien race, if you're out there, here we are, human race, we want to be friends. Not a good idea. Very stupid idea. Anyway, hope that gives you a little bit of a feeling for what it's like out in some other parts of the galaxy. I've got just a minute left here. I want to go back to my water filters. If you have a stainless steel or plastic water filter container out there, the containers that you bought in the last 10 or 15 years, upgrade to my GF water filters and get a 10-pack, get a 4-pack, whatever, but start using those and start getting truly clean water. That is, when you use these, the water filters are certified to take out. And if you want to see what all they take out, just go to my sales page, scroll down a little bit in the gray table at the top there, and there's a link. It says water filter element specification sheet. Click on that and go to that page and see all of the stuff that my filter elements take out. Now, what's the difference? Like I say, I don't even have any competition because other people make lists too. You know what the difference is? They don't have any testing done. They're just saying that. If you ask them about testing, they can't produce any, or if they do, it's some goofy thing they did themselves 10 years ago or something. But the point is that my water filters are tested, and I don't have competition. There's nobody that has anything like this on the market. So upgrade your water filter to use the JMCC water filter elements, and buy a 4-pack or a 10-pack and get ready for the future, because the one thing everybody needs every day is clean water. Just a quick story. This last year I've done a lot of traveling to remote areas, places where the water is potentially good, but it needs to be filtered. And I don't care where you go anymore, where you travel to, take a water filter with you. I also have my personal water filters, the 1 and 2 liter size. You can put them in your suitcase or in your briefcase. Don't leave home without one. And it has the same GF technology as in the bigger filters for the home and kitchen size, etc. Also, the sink top models are there, the under counter models. I even have water filters for horses and animals. So go check it out, jmccsci.com. And don't forget, I have a sale on everything in the water filter line, all the gravity feed stuff in the water filter line until April 10th. That's this coming Sunday evening, midnight. The sale will end, so go there and take advantage of that. This is Jim McCanney. This is my Science Hour, and as always, we are at the crossroads. Good night.